Welcome to another episode of Crescendo, where the journey of self-discovery meets the adventure of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Rachel Lipchansky, an entrepreneur turned business mentor and strategist, guiding women to build businesses that align with who they are at their core, the positive change they want to see in the world, and the financial security they desire. I am really happy to be back after a summer hiatus from the podcast with my guest, my client, and my friend, Julie Meyerowitz, this morning. She was traditionally trained as a speech-language pathologist at Columbia University in New York City, following her somewhat less traditional education in dramatherapy at Goucher College in Baltimore. And what you're going to hear from her this morning is how she has studied many different modalities and how she has really challenged some of the gold standard treatments for autism children. And over time, how she's developed her own signature method, how she's found her voice, not just for herself in business, but for her clients as well. I am delighted to introduce my client, my friend, Julie, a dynamic communication coach. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
I'm happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit at the outset now about your business.
So, actually, finding your voice is very relevant for what I do on many levels because um, the traditional training that I had in speech therapy at Columbia was one of the first fairly traditional things that I found myself doing in my life. And I found it to be kind of on a train track that I wasn't comfortable with. And particularly for my students with autism, my clients with autism, like, they were getting skills, but it wasn't necessarily translating to life, and so I have been finding my voice in my practice and, of course, literally have helped many, um, clients working one-on-one, in person, online, to literally find their voices, become verbal, and become more engaged with life on their own terms.
It's so beautiful. Now, you and I have had the opportunity to work together over the last several months. And one of the things that I'm consistently amazed by is how you're able to help families go from having very little ways of communicating with their children to having kids who then are just relieved almost at finding their ways of being able to communicate and interact with people. Tell us a little bit about, one of your clients and what that journey looked like, where they started when they came to you and where they are today, just so we can get a real sense of what finding your voice looks like in this kind of work.
Yeah, it's a little I have a crowd enter my head when you say speak about a client, but I am thinking of, one family in particular that they actually contacted me actually moments before I was about to close up my computer to make Aliyah and pack it away. And I said, "Are you sure you want to work with me?" And they're like, "Yes, we want to work with you." And they did not have formal diagnoses, but the father said, very bright parents, very bright kids, that the parents had done their research and they felt that the father and one of the children were on the spectrum. So we worked together, this family, for exactly a year. Our end date was exactly the date a year later from the start date. And there was a lot of conflict in the family, particularly between the father and this child. And we started a lot of just not knowing what to do. It was also during COVID, so a lot of us weren't knowing what to do. And this sibling, it was the oldest of a large family. He would often be getting into fights with his other younger siblings, and of course, he was bigger, so it was a little scary for the parents. Um, and then there are also things that the father wasn't necessarily reading the cues from the mother, and knowing what her needs were, which was creating a tense dynamic in the family. So, a few months in, probably like 3 to 6 months in, we got to the point that this older brother, um, was sitting back and watching what was happening with his younger brothers, that they were entering a conflict, and he was able to help them. And he came to his mother and said, "I'm a problem solver," which is a lot of what we had been working on, that he was finding who he was and what he was capable of, and he was actually helping the younger brothers as opposed to being the catalyst for all of the chaos that had been happening previously. And then after that, they said, you know what, he's doing great. Let's talk about the younger siblings. And we spent the rest of the year just sorting out different like issues in the rest of the family. And by the time we ended, there was a lot of that year. There was a lot of progress with the children. My one concern was that there were still some things that I wasn't sure that the father was totally picking up on what the mother needed. We met again a year after that. This is now a couple years ago, and the father had an area of expertise that I needed help with, and I had been expecting that he's going to share his expertise with me, and I'm going to write it all down. He was a brilliant man, and afterwards take some time to figure out like what that meant for me. And he started the conversation by saying, leading up to our meeting today, I thought about what I know about you and the way that your mind works based on how you coached us, and what your needs are based on what you've shared with us. And these are the resources that I think will be most helpful for you. And I didn't ask the mom, but from that, I could gather that he is now reading other people based on the coaching that I gave him to how to interact with his children, that he also has shifted. And he was definitely like the kinds of questions he was asking me, the kind of way he was responding to my questions for him was like a lot more patience than I had seen before. Also like with the recognition that my IQ isn't his IQ, and he's able to like talk to me as me, not as just like another him. And then it was my job to interpret as it had been before. And this was basically the progress that they had made from the time that we had finished working together, just carrying over. My goal is that family won't need me anymore. And that's what they did. And they were telling me things that they were continuing to carry over, and the progress that he had continued to make after our time together, because my goal is that the clients will have their own mastering, can continue to develop without the coaching.
This is such a powerful story. And for those of you who aren't watching us on YouTube, but are listening to the podcast, you can't tell perhaps that Julie actually got emotional when she was sharing that story. And the reason I bring that up is because, Julie, you and I are both moms, and we know as mothers that what do parents want more than anything for their children? And when we are raising neurodivergent children, often I think we end up in situations where we're just questioning, like, what will their future look like? What is possible for them? And I can see how personal this work is to you, and how emotionally attached you are to the outcomes that your clients achieve, which is
Yeah.
really, really beautiful. Now, I know from working with you that you self-identify as a neurodivergent woman, and that you're
Yeah.
particularly inspired by helping other parents and children gain confidence
Yeah.
in their own abilities, to make space for themselves and to get what they want in this world. When parents come to you, how much of that message do you feel you need to share with them, that there is hope, there is a future different from the one that they are currently in? And yeah, just tell us like a little bit more about what that piece of it looks like. And gosh, I'm asking like 5 questions in one, but I want to
I should be
know, because
taking
it's like
notes.
all flooding. I know it's all flooding
Yeah.
me. Like I want to know, when parents come to you, um, how much they recognize that there is a different future for their children. And then the second part of the question has to do with you being a neurodivergent woman, and how personally connected you are to the mission of this work.
Right. So I think I'm gonna, if it's okay for me to flip it. So, I will say I don't know that I do personally identify as a neurodivergent woman. But officially, based on the definition of neurodivergence, I was diagnosed with ADD at the age of 17. Women and girls tend to be diagnosed older. I have another family
Yes.
member who was male, who was diagnosed 7 years younger. Yeah, the signs are very different. this is a longer and different conversation, but I have a lot of questions about the way that diagnoses are used and sometimes misused. A lot of my personal journey and a lot of like the fire that drives me in the work that I'm doing now is a finding that there's a lot of the way diagnoses and treatment are used and utilized and what's prioritized creates a codependent system. So it sends a message to the family like, oh, this is your child is this big scary diagnosis, whatever it may be. And most of my work is with autism, but it is also effective with other things, including I was working on myself through my training as well. And my own life has shifted in a lot of ways. But it's this message that this child is this diagnosis and you're just a parent. And so what that sets up, is a dependence on this system of experts who are positioned as we know more about you and your child than you do. And we're more capable of handling your child than you are. So this puts a division between the parent and the child, which I think is just tragic, particularly when we're talking about autism, when we're talking about what the greatest struggle is with social connection. Now you're talking about the gold standard is driving a wedge between a child who's struggling with social connection and their most vital social relationship in their life that all of their other relationships are based on between them and their parent. So the other thing is what we talked about. I think that you pointed to this earlier. What we want for our children is we want them to live their own best lives, not be some models of us or some therapeutic or educational model or something. We want them to be themselves and the world as it is. We also, a lot of people try to recreate a world that fits their child, but that also could just lead to ongoing crisis. So my goal for myself was to become independent of this system that was demanding dependence on like drugs and therapies that were supposed to go on forever and ever. And so find ways for me to manage my own life without being dependent on this outside system that doesn't really know me. And so looking for answers for myself and building a life that works for myself. That's kind of the other piece of what we're talking about. And then also passing this on to my clients. Um, I say early on, this is like the messaging that we do early on is, and this is part of the hope, that my goal is like I have on my website a picture of Annie Oakley. Anything I can do, you can do better. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And I know you have a music background, so you're familiar with
I
that.
know. I'm like singing that tune now in my
I know.
head.
I wasn't Annie, get your gun. I wasn't Annie. I don't have your voice.
Okay.
So I was a very side character. And because there's a lot of self-doubt built into this like urgency. And like you have to have 1,000 therapies every day or else. But then what that leads to is just dependence. So I say at the beginning of our work together with my clients that everything I know, I've learned, and you're intelligent. I can teach you. And my goal is that you'll master it because this ultimately is what you want for your child. You want to be able to pass this on to your child. So I'm continuing to learn and grow and everything professionally and as a therapist and a coach. And everything that I learn and read like comes into the sessions. We're talking about like some things that I do and coaching come from Seth Godin or or like things that are in the world of entrepreneurship. Some things that I'm doing as a business coach are things that I learned from the world of coaching and therapy. The goal is that the parents will master what needs to be mastered. And like these families that I'm talking about, they continue to grow after our time together. And so that they could pass that on to their children, so their child could internalize it and master it for themselves and live their own life as themselves.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about now is just the progression of that, how you start in this pretty traditional path of wanting to support these kids and really finding a better way, and how we as business owners I think when we are lifelong learners, we end up sometimes down this path where we're really challenging the status quo or what others call the gold standard. I
Mhm.
want to know, I'd love for you to share with our listeners what challenging the gold standard has felt like in your business.
A little bit like walking through fire daily. Also, it's interesting because I'm an introvert and I'm a speech therapist who works in a very small, secluded office online. I do all of my work online. And that's something that I found for my own nervous system and for the kind of modeling that I even want to do for my clients, like make a life that works for you. Um, I so early on, I had to come to the place to convince myself that this actually works better than traditional methods. At this point, and also I didn't want to threaten anybody's livelihood. But at this point, from my own experience, from the feedback that I've gotten from clients years into it, I've just seen enough families and individuals accomplish things for themselves that most people are told isn't possible for somebody with a certain diagnosis, particularly autism. Um, and so it's put me in a place of reflection on, okay, so why do, like, if I'm seeing this happening, for example, like starting to talk later or making certain kinds of connections or something that we talk about, personal agency, which is kind of like your own internal drive to do and engage with the world, like developing that as opposed to just learning skills that are like plug and play in different situations. Um, like if it's working, why do they say that it's not possible? So if something is considered to be the gold standard and is not accomplishing something, like if a method is considered to be the gold standard and it's not helping the clients to reach certain goals, then the assumption then is the best doesn't get us there. I think it really comes down to you have to question, is it really the best? And in our field, what is considered the gold standard, there are a lot of voices of adult autistics who are raised in the traditional methods that report like PTSD symptoms of basically having a focus on compliance rather than or following certain rules or learning certain rules as opposed to helping them find their voices and helping them to engage with the world as it is and make thought out decisions that work for them.
Wow. I can't help but think that getting your message out around this is so vital. I mean, because as you're talking about, you're working with kids, but as you speak with adults who are
Yeah,
reporting these types of experiences later in life,
right.
the evidence is clear. Why do you think people continue to go to the gold standards then? The
It's
certain
covered by
types of
insurance.
treatments, it's covered by insurance.
I'm
Um,
sorry to cut you off, Rachel. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. It's just, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's covered by insurance. That's a response that I get with a lot of my clients who are in various types of areas of therapy. But the thing is if your approach takes less time and is not a lifelong
Right.
commitment. It's a
Right.
lifelong commitment of work, right? But that's like for
Yeah.
all of us. I mean, we're all working on ourselves.
But the shifts are over a year or two. And then at that point, you're in a place of like raising kids is a lifelong commitment. Uh,
Maintenance.
yeah. Well, it's like it's to shift from what's not working to mastery of what does work, and then you
Mhm.
have to be committed to keep doing what works.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. But I think it's so promising to hear from you that those outcomes can be possible within a year or
yeah,
two,
yeah.
especially when you have been working with several families where children come in completely nonverbal.
Hmm.
They don't have a way, they don't have the tools or the ability at this moment in time to be able to communicate their needs, their desires, their joys,
Yeah,
whatever it might be. And to know that by putting in that effort for a year or two, which of
Mhm.
course, in the short term might feel like a whole lot of time, but in the
Right.
long run of our children's lives, it's really
Yeah.
nothing. Um, I can see why this evokes such emotion in you.
Yeah.
um, because we really want more people to hear
Right.
about this possibility and this different way of this
Mhm.
different methodology that really you have crafted, like with you being your own best patient or client first and
Yeah.
foremost, and
Yeah.
then taking this to more people.
Um, I do think it's important to emphasize that I haven't invented anything. Like, I have put together there are a lot of I think I still am for a few more months. I've decided not to renew. But for several years, I've been certified as a relationship development intervention consultant. And a lot of this methodology is taken from that. And a lot of it is things that I thought needed to be clarified. And a lot of my method is a lot of what I thought needed to be clarified or simplified, at least for my work with clients, from that relationship development intervention approach. But I've also everything is evidence-based, research-based, like the best parts of well-known programs and some lesser-known programs that are being used in universities, university clinics. Um, and there are some things that I've introduced into the method that like tie up some loose ends, but again, it's not nothing that I've invented. It's like things that we already know,
I think
just
this is a
pulling it through.
super important point. I'm glad you brought this
Yeah,
up because this
yeah.
this very much applies to us and our businesses. I mean, there is so much research. There are so many methodologies out there, and I think the
Mhm.
most successful businesses and part of finding our own voice in our business is figuring out, well, what is the concoction, right? What is that mix that works for us? And
Yeah.
so that's what you've done really beautifully for your own clients. You've taken, I mean, again, if, as a lifelong learner, somebody who is really invested in learning the various approaches, the looking at the research, figuring out and analyzing and so forth, and then deciding based on your own evidence and practice and experience in your business what works for you and for your clients. And this is a message that I hope rings really loudly for all business owners. Sometimes we look to the experts and we look
Mhm.
outside of ourselves and we think that person holds all the answers. And it's
Mhm.
just not true. It's not the case that one person or one approach is going to work for everybody or that that's the best or the right just
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they have the greatest visibility on Instagram or, a million followers or whatever it might be, or their post on LinkedIn got 87 engagements. It doesn't mean that that is the only way forward. And so what you're inviting people into and what I really appreciate that you're bringing here is this invitation to challenge what you're seeing and what you're reading, like, and not putting those things just in their own bubble and box, on a pedestal, but really
Mhm. Mhm.
utilizing all these different tools and research and methodology and voices that we hear around us to then find where our voice is within all of it and then create our own vision and our own way of practicing going from there. That's certainly what I've done in my business. That's what I guide and hope for my own
Yeah.
clients is, part of coaching is asking those questions, not because I can't answer the question for you, but I can't answer it in your voice and I
Right.
can't answer it in a way that will always work for you and your business. So tell us now what that has been like. You came to me, you were looking for a business coach
Alright.
and shifting from, I'm looking for answers to finding so many of those answers within yourself, just as you did for your clients and in your process that you follow for your clients.
I do wanna say to draw from one to the other, I actually have above my desk, behind the computer that I'm sitting at, I was actually in one of the COVID food lines in Baltimore, where we moved here from. Um, I saw a bumper sticker and I took a picture because they were very slow. I was able to take a picture while driving. A bumper sticker that says, "I could be wrong." And as a coach and a therapist, I want to have that. I get emotional when I say this one, but I want to have that reminder that in the way that I speak, to make it clear that I am not the authority on your experience in your life. A lot of the beginning work is reassuring people of what they're already doing right, so they know to do more of it. But then I also, a lot of it is for me to support them, to support their child, to trust their gut. And that's a lot of what's taken away by traditional methods that focus on like compliance and skills and rules. Um, that like ignore your gut and do what's right is that message. Um, that doesn't lead to independence. That doesn't lead to mastery. That leads to like a lifetime of self-doubt and dysregulation and bad non-compliant behavior. It's which makes you lifelong dependent on them because they're supposed to be the solution to that, right? Um, it's interesting. As I have trusted myself more and more in the method, I do think that my clients, I'm able to pass it on to my clients more. As I trust myself more and more in the business, I am able to pass, like, to help them to trust themselves more. Like I could probably be giving over all of these same pieces that I'm giving over, but without that, it wouldn't tie together. It wouldn't be a cohesive whole. Um, because like what we want for the children is that they have the mastery, that they grow into the mastery, and they grow into the self assurance to engage with the world as it is. And we can't do that if we're doubting ourselves.
Absolutely. I like to talk about some of the messy parts of business because sometimes people get to this point and they're like, "Yes, I've spent years refining my process and the way that I work with my clients." But there really is a messy middle. Can you speak a
Yes.
little bit to the messy middle of where you've been in the past?
In the past 3 dates. No, Rachel, I'm always perfectly confident and know exactly what I'm doing all the time. Uh, um, and actually, this is like a win that I'm gonna share with you the next time, is trusting the process enough to let go of what everybody says should work. Like, as I'm growing my practice, I'm supplementing as my coaching practice, I'm supplementing with like easy for me because I've been doing it for 16 years, speech therapy contracts. And one of them was a hot mess. And I felt like I needed to hold on to it because it was the responsible thing to do. And it was like at 6 a.m. a few days ago. I'm like, wait a second. No, why? And I've let go of it. I've already given notice and just like breathe through it. Like, and I see that a lot of my families, a lot of what is dysregulating them, a lot of what is keeping them in crisis is feeling this need to be running to all of the right therapies and all of the right treatments. But none of those treatments can address the crisis that they're in from the running. And that state of crisis is undermining the foundation of everything that they're trying to accomplish by running to the therapies. So it doesn't mean that they'll never be there, but like if your child can't be present and engaged with the therapy, that could be something to let go of as an
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah. Really great. Well, I've seen you transform dramatically. If it's okay that I share a little bit
Sure,
of
sure.
your
Yeah.
story as a business owner,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
I always say to people, I only work with smart women. So when I meet with clients, I already know like the baseline is they are bright and they're ambitious and they're creative and they have so much potential. And the same was very true for you. When I first met with you, I'm like, wow, this woman knows her stuff. She is clearly very effective in the way that she works with her
Okay.
clients. And the business side of things just doesn't always come real naturally for people, which is
Yeah.
totally fine. That's where I come in, right, with my business expertise. And I just know it's like sitting here, it rolls off your tongue what you do. And, we didn't even get into really the details of your signature
Mhm.
method, but Julie's got
Right,
an
right.
incredible signature method that has these different elements of connection that she walks her clients through creating, and it's just hugely transformational work, right? So we're not going to have time to get into that today, but all of that was in your head, right? All of that was in there, but it gets
Right.
kind of mumbled, jumbled, and overwhelmed with the business, right? And we're like,
Mhm.
well, are we supposed to say it a certain way?
Mhm.
And sometimes just being able, our process that we went through together was just getting all of it out of your head and
Mhm.
organizing it. It was all
Mhm.
within you.
Mhm.
And this is one of the things that I I look to draw out of my clients, my smart women who come to me, is that it's all already within you, and sometimes it just
Mhm.
needs to be reorganized. And so if you, our listeners, are in that place where you feel like you're in that messy middle, it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless at all, right? It's all within you, and it just might need to be organized, cleaned up. Sometimes you need just somebody else to come in and reflect back to you,
Mhm.
because we do start, as you were saying, Julie, we do sit in that area of doubt for a
Mhm.
long time unless there's something in that comes in and disrupts that for us. So it's just been such a joy to watch that transformation and to facilitate it with you, as you've gone from, this place where all of these ideas and everything were in your head, and now they're just articulated so beautifully and
Yeah.
effectively. And you yourself can communicate them to your prospective clients,
Yeah.
and ultimately then create so much more impact for other families.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, I've known for a while that I could communicate it over the course of a year or two, but introducing it to new people, I've had to do it in a few minutes. Now I feel like I'm more able to do that.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Before we wrap, I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, which is, what is one tip that you have for other women in business striving to find their authentic voice?
Um, this is to do nothing. This is, I was given a tip like this years ago. But it's also a method that I use with my clients. And every time I say it, people look at me like I'm nuts. Do nothing with your child this week. That doesn't mean don't interact with your child, but like stop pushing. If you don't chase them, why would they run away? If you don't push them, why would they push back? And that I think happens internally as well. We're always chasing after something out there and pushing ourselves and silencing ourselves in the meantime. So I've been trying to do a practice of doing like some qigong on my porch or just sit with some music for 5 to 20 minutes every night. It's a different place. This is just with myself, but a lot of clients after they fight it, it's usually the most like intelligent go-getter parents that are like most freaked out by this idea. I have one mom who's very driven, kind of very organized kind of a woman. It transformed her relationship with her son. She would send me videos of them. They're going for a walk. They sit down. All I see in the video is their feet and grass because they just decided to sit in the middle of the sidewalk and spend time together. They had never done that because they were always running to fix his terrible problem. After that, they became a mother and son. He was no longer their problem. He was their baby. And acceptance, you can't have a relationship without acceptance. So prioritize doing nothing.
Such a great tip. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Julie, it's been a pleasure
Mhm.
having you. How can people best connect with you and learn more about your program?
Probably the best thing is to go to my website, which is www.hearmywordsautism.com. My method is based on autism methods, but it's also effective for OCD, ADD, PTSD, things that look like these things. Diagnosis isn't necessary for treatment, and there's a contact form on there, but you could also get some more information on there as well.
Fabulous. And of course, I'll link the website and all of our notes in the show notes. And I just want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today, for sharing in this conversation with Julie. If this episode struck a chord or generated an insight that you'd like to capture, please do take a moment to comment, like, or share this episode with your friends on socials. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything coming up in the future. Until next time, keep sharing your voice.